Good evening, dear listeners, and a very warm welcome to you all. Wherever you are tuning in from tonight, maybe cozied up in bed, listening from your favourite quiet corner at home, or perhaps relaxing somewhere peaceful with the world fading away outside. I'm so glad you've joined me here. Take a slow, deep breath. Let your shoulders drop. Maybe pull the covers up a bit higher and feel the day gently slip away. Let the story begin. The Royal Danish Library in Copenhagen was the perfect stage for tragedy. Elegant reading rooms with polished mahogany tables, velvet-lined display cases, and the faint scent of aged leather bindings, and every scholar and guest played their refined role amid the hush of turning pages. Then Dr. Erik Haldor, renowned curator of rare manuscripts, who was found dead in the secure manuscript room, poisoned by a rare botanical toxin slipped into his after-dinner coffee. The police saw a simple case of professional jealousy or accidental overdose. But Hercule Poirot saw a performance. Someone in this theatre of ancient knowledge and modern scholarship was playing the role of innocent, the role of murderer. The curtain rises. Chapter 1. The stage is set. The Royal Danish Library rose above the Slottsholmen Canal like a classical theatre carved from pale stone and time. Its older wing, completed in 1906, presented perfect symmetry. Its newer extensions breathed quiet modernity. But the true drama belonged to the manuscript room, a vault of hushed reverence where priceless volumes slept behind glass, under the soft glow of Art Deco sconces, and the air inside was cool and thick with layered scents. The rich must of centuries-old vellum, the sharp bite of furniture wax on mahogany tables, the lingering trace of expensive perfume, Chanel No. 5 perhaps, worn by yesterday's visitors. A grandfather clock in the corridor beyond the heavy oak doors chimed the quarter hour with grave authority. Footsteps on parquet floors sounded crisp and deliberate. Velvet curtains drawn across tall windows muffled the rain tapping against glass. Dr. Erik Haldor had been discovered just after midnight. He sat at his personal desk in the secure inner chamber, body slumped forward, forehead resting almost gently on an open page of the Copenhagen Manuscript, the illuminated 14th century chronicle of Danish royal lineage that had been his life's obsession for the past 3 years. One hand still loosely held a vellum sheet. The other rested beside an empty coffee cup. The porcelain bore no lipstick trace. Haldor had always taken his coffee black and scalding. Toxicology would later confirm a rare plant alkaloid, derived from a South American vine once used by indigenous hunters, administered in a single lethal dose. Death had come swiftly but not noiselessly. A small froth of saliva had dried at the corner of his mouth. The police photographer's flash caught the detail in harsh white light. Inspector Larsen of the Copenhagen police arrived first. His heavy boots left faint marks on the polished floor. He examined the scene with the brisk efficiency of a man who had seen too many late-night deaths in libraries and studies. Suicide, he pronounced almost at once. Haldor had enemies in academic circles. Rival scholars who disputed his dating of the manuscript. Jealous colleagues who resented the sudden international attention it brought the library. Perhaps the pressure had become too much. Or perhaps a careless mistake with some experimental chemical he kept for pigment analysis. Yet the arrangement felt theatrical. The manuscript lay open to a passage describing the betrayal and murder of a medieval Danish prince by his trusted adviser. The pen rested parallel to the edge of the desk. The chair had not been overturned. Even the coffee cup sat exactly centered on its saucer, as though placed there by a director who valued symmetry. Hercule Poirot arrived the following morning at the personal invitation of Fru Margaret Nielsen, the library's formidable director. She met him in the vestibule, a Chanel suite, impeccable, a faint scent of lilies trailing her. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, voice low, "we cannot afford scandal. The manuscript exhibition opens in 3 weeks. Patrons have flown in from London, Paris, New York. If this is seen as murder—" Poirot inclined his egg-shaped head. "Madam, where art and money meet, there is always the possibility of performance. Let us see the stage." He stepped into the manuscript room. The chill of marble fought the warmth rising from discreet radiators. Crystal chandeliers tinkled very faintly when a door closed somewhere distant. He inhaled slowly. Furniture wax, the ghost of strong continental coffee, a trace of Cuban cigar smoke that had drifted in with one of the previous evening's guests. Poirot walked directly to the desk. He did not touch anything. His small, as precise hands remained clasped behind his back. His green eyes moved methodically across the scene. "Observe," he murmured. "The body has not been moved. The coffee cup remains precisely where it was set down. The manuscript page, deliberately chosen, or merely coincidence?" He tilted his head. "Mais non. Coincidence is the refuge of the lazy mind." The cast of characters was summoned. First came Fru Ingrid Haldor, the widow, in unrelieved black silk that rustled softly with every careful step. Her Worth perfume arrived before she did, heady rose and jasmine. She pressed a lace handkerchief to eyes that remained perfectly dry. "Eric was everything," she said, voice pitched to tremble at exactly the right moments. "He lived for this manuscript." Poirot watched. "You see with Poirot, no? The shoulders shake appropriately. The handkerchief dabs. Yet the silk beneath the eyes stays unstained. The performance of grief is technically flawless. Too flawless." Next entered Professor Lars Müller, Haldor's longtime rival and co-curator until 6 months earlier. Rough tweed jacket, strong sandalwood cologne, hands thrust deep in pockets to hide their tension. "We argued, yes," Müller admitted. "He claimed the illuminations were Danish original work. I said Flemish influence. Possibly copy, but murder? Ridiculous." Poirot smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. "And yet your fingers remain remarkably steady, Professor, even as you speak of a man's death, a rival's death." Fruken Anna Voss, the young assistant curator, followed. Crisp white linen blouse, soft kid gloves, faint lily-of-the-valley scent. Her voice broke convincingly when she spoke of Haldor's mentorship. "He believed in me when no one else did," she whispered. Poirot's gaze sharpened. The tremble in the hands, genuine, but the glance toward the display case where the manuscript now rests under guard. That glance is not the glance of simple sorrow. Herr Johann Brandt, the financier who had underwritten the authentication and the coming exhibition, entered trailing Cuban cigar smoke that clung to his velvet-collared coat. He carried himself like a man accustomed to owning the stage. "A terrible loss," he said, "for scholarship, for Denmark, for investment." Poirot's moustache twitched very slightly. "Magnifique! The role of the generous patron is played with conviction. Yet observe how his eyes return again and again to the vellum, never to the widow. Finally, Fru Nielsen herself, still in Chanel, a faint taste of dry champagne lingering in memory from the previous evening's small reception. She described the night. Champagne corks popping softly, distant piano music drifting from the atrium, hothouse roses scenting the air, laughter behind velvet curtains. "Eric was radiant," she said. He believed the manuscript would secure his legacy. Poirot arranged 2 pens on the desk into perfect parallel lines. "The stage is prepared with exquisite care," he said softly. "The lighting perfect, the props priceless. The actors, each one cultured, each one accomplished, have taken their marks. Widow, rival, protégé, patron, guardian." He turned toward the tall window, where rain traced slow paths down the glass. "But one of them has forgotten the most important rule of theatre." He paused. "Truth does not rehearse." The stage was set. The players had taken their places. Let the drama begin. Chapter 2. Enter the players. The interviews were conducted in the library director's private office, a small but exquisite stage tucked behind the main reading room. Mahogany panels gleamed under low lamplight. Heavy velvet curtains in deep burgundy absorbed sound and kept the harbour chill at bay. A fire crackled softly in the grate, sending faint wood smoke curling into the air, where it mingled with the scent of strong continental coffee, just poured into porcelain cups. Crystal sugar tongs clinked once against a saucer. Fru Ingrid Haldor entered first. Her black silk gown rustled like a whispered secret as she crossed the parquet, and the Worth perfume she wore, rose and jasmine, arrived a heartbeat before she did, rich and almost cloying against the room's restrained elegance. She seated herself with deliberate grace, crossed her ankles, placed gloved hands in her lap. "I was asleep when it happened," she began, voice soft but steady. "Eric often worked late. He said the manuscript demanded his full attention at night, when the building was quiet. I took a sleeping draught for my headache and knew nothing until the police arrived." Poirot regarded her across the small table. He touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. "Grief performs many ways, madame. Some weep rivers, some sit frozen. You, however, deliver your lines with perfect composure. The handkerchief you carry remains folded, unused." Ingrid's gaze flickered downward for the briefest instant, then returned to meet his eyes. "I have cried enough in private," she said. "One must keep dignity in public." Poirot inclined his head. "Mais oui, dignity is an excellent mask." Professor Lars Müller came next. His tweed jacket carried the faint outdoor scent of damp wool, and the sharper note of sandalwood cologne. He refused the offered chair at first, preferring to stand near the fire, as though needing its warmth to steady himself. "We disagreed about the manuscript," he admitted without preamble. "Haldor insisted the illuminations were pure Danish craftsmanship from the 1340s. I maintained they showed clear Flemish influence, possibly a later copy or commission. Academic debate, nothing more. I was at the Royal Club dining until 11. He asked the maître d'. His hands remained in his pockets, but Poirot noted the knuckles showed white. "You speak of rivalry as though it were merely chess," Poirot observed. "Yet chess pieces do not die when checkmated. And your hands, Professor, they do not tremble, even now. A man discussing the violent death of a colleague usually betrays some agitation, unless he has rehearsed this moment." Müller gave a short laugh that held no humour. "I am not an emotional man, Monsieur Poirot." "Precisely," Poirot murmured. "Too precise, perhaps." Fruken Anna Voss entered almost timidly. Her crisp linen blouse was buttoned to the throat. Soft kid gloves covered hands that twisted together. A delicate lily-of-the-valley perfume drifted from her, fragile against the heavier scents of the room. "Dr. Haldor was kind to me," she said, voice catching. "When I arrived here 3 years ago, fresh from university, everyone dismissed me as too young. He gave me responsibility. He believed I had potential." Tears welled, genuine enough to glisten. One escaped and traced a careful path down her cheek. Poirot leaned forward slightly. The tears are real. The tremble in the fingers is real. But the eyes, mademoiselle, they dart toward the door, as though expecting interruption or rescue. Why is that, do you think? Anna wiped her cheek with the back of a gloved hand. "I'm frightened," she whispered. "Someone killed him. And I was here that evening. I left late. If people think—" She stopped. Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head. "Fear performs convincingly. But fear of what, precisely? Discovery? Or accusation?" Herr Johann Brandt arrived in a swirl of Cuban cigar smoke that clung stubbornly to his velvet-collared overcoat. He carried the faint metallic tang of money and the sweeter residue of champagne from the previous night's reception. "I funded the authentication," he said without sitting. "I paid for the best experts, the carbon dating, the infrared analysis. The manuscript was to be the jewel of my collection, on long-term loan to the library, naturally. Its value has just evaporated." He made a small gesture of regret. Poirot arranged the coffee spoons into perfect alignment. "Yet your concern seems fixed on value, rather than on the man who authenticated it. Curious, no? A patron mourns the scholar, a financier mourns the asset." Brandt smiled thinly. "I can mourn both, Monsieur Poirot. I am a man of many compartments." "Compartments," Poirot echoed softly, like a well-rehearsed script. Fru Margaret Nielsen entered last, still wearing the same Chanel suit from the morning. A single strand of pearls gleamed against the dark wool. She poured herself coffee with steady hands, the hot liquid sending up a thin curl of steam. "The reception ended at 10, she said. "Champagne corks, laughter, the scent of hothouse roses on every table." Eric remained behind to lock the manuscript room. He was alone, or so we believed. The key to the inner chamber was missing for an hour the next morning. It reappeared on my desk before lunch. No explanation. Poirot's green eyes gleamed with interest. "A key that vanishes and returns. A classic piece of stage business. Someone wished the police to believe the room was never breached. Yet you, madame, mention it so casually. Why draw attention to the flaw in the performance?" Nielsen met his gaze without flinching. "Because hiding it would be worse. I prefer transparency." "Transparency," Poirot repeated, "a rare virtue in any theatre." He rose, small and precise, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. "You have all entered the stage," he said quietly. "Widow, rival, protégé, patron, guardian. Each has spoken, each has performed. The lines are smooth, the gestures appropriate, the alibis almost convincing." He turned toward the fire, watching the flames dance behind the screen. "But truth does not require rehearsal. Lies do. And lies, mon ami, always leave small traces. Missed cues, dry handkerchiefs, steady hands when they should tremble, glances toward doors that should not matter." He faced them once more, as though the room was now empty of everyone except memory. "The players have spoken their opening lines. The audience, that is to say, Hercule Poirot, has listened carefully." He paused. "Now we wait to see who forgets theirs." Every actor had taken their mark, but who played truth? Chapter 3. The First Act. The first real crack appeared during a quiet afternoon in the library's conservation laboratory. The room smelled faintly of solvents and fresh linen from the acid-free tissue used to cradle fragile pages. A single high window admitted pale northern light that fell across the long work table like a spotlight. Outside, rain continued its soft, persistent drumming on the glass. Poirot had requested access to the Copenhagen Manuscript itself. Fru Nielsen unlocked the inner safe, with a small brass key that still carried the ghost of yesterday's unease. She withdrew the bound volume, its dark calfskin cover tooled with faded gold, and placed it reverently on the padded surface. Poirot did not open it at once. He circled the table slowly, small hands clasped behind his back, green eyes moving over every detail. The faint crease near the spine, the minute discoloration at one corner, the way the vellum seemed to breathe slightly in the controlled humidity. "Observe, mon ami," he murmured, though he was alone except for the silent volume. "This manuscript has performed its role perfectly for centuries. Yet, even ancient parchment can betray secrets when examined under the right light." He lifted a magnifying lens from the conservator's tray. Beneath the lens, a single tiny thread, modern cotton, pale blue, protruded almost imperceptibly from the inner hinge of the front board. It had been caught when someone hastily reattached a loosened end paper. Poirot's moustache twitched with satisfaction. "The first mask slips. Did you see it?" He summoned Fröken Anna Voss to the laboratory. She arrived promptly, still in her crisp linen blouse, kid gloves already removed and tucked into her pocket. Her lily-of-the-valley scent seemed fainter today, as though anxiety had begun to dull it. "You assisted Dr. Haldor with the final collation before the reception," Poirot began without preamble. "Tell me again about the evening of his death." Anna's fingers tightened on the edge of the work table. "I left at 9:30. Eric was still working. He said he wanted to compare the illuminations one last time under natural moonlight through the skylight. I thought it poetic." Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head. "Poetic, yes. Yet the skylight in the manuscript room faces north. Moonlight would be weak at best. And the thread we have just discovered, this modern blue cotton, was not present when the manuscript was last conserved 2 months ago. The conservator's report is quite clear." Anna's face paled, but she held his gaze. "I don't understand." "You do not understand?" Poirot echoed gently. "Or you do not wish to understand? The thread matches exactly the colour of the lining in your own notebook, the one you carry always. The notebook in which you record your private observations of the manuscript. Observations that perhaps were never meant to be shared." A long silence followed, and the rain tapped insistently. Somewhere distant, the grandfather clock chimed 3. Anna's shoulders began to shake, not the rehearsed tremor of the widow, but something raw. I only wanted to prove something," she whispered. "Eric was going to present the manuscript as entirely Danish, but I found inconsistencies, Flemish pigments, a watermark that didn't match the period. I told him. He became angry, said I was jeopardizing everything, the exhibition, the funding, his reputation." Poirot nodded slowly. "And so you repaired the hinge yourself, in secret, after he was dead, to protect his legacy, or to protect your own discovery?" Tears came then, real ones streaking mascara in thin black lines. "I didn't kill him," she said fiercely, "but I was afraid. If the forgery, or partial forgery, was revealed, my career would end before it began. I thought, if no one knew." Poirot drew himself up to his full, modest height. "The mask has cracked, mademoiselle. Not completely fallen, not yet, but cracked. You performed the loyal protégé admirably. Yet loyalty does not hide evidence in the dark." He turned away, allowing her a moment to compose herself. This small revelation reminded him of another case, years earlier, the affair of the Ackroyd forgery in an English country house. A collector had presented a supposedly Shakespearean letter to a private auction. The handwriting was flawless, The ink convincingly aged, the paper apparently period correct. Yet the seller, a charming young antiquarian, had rehearsed his astonishment so perfectly that even Scotland Yard was momentarily deceived. He widened his eyes, dropped his jaw, pressed a trembling hand to his forehead. But he made one fatal error. When asked to handle the letter again for examination, his fingers left no trace of nervous sweat on the paper. A truly shocked man perspires. His body betrays him, even when his face lies. The antiquarian had practiced every gesture in front of a mirror for weeks. The little grey cells had seen what the eyes missed. Steadiness, where shock should have brought tremor. In the end, the forger confessed not because of physical evidence, but because Poirot had shone the spotlight on that single dry palm. Performance, however brilliant, always leaves one unguarded corner where truth waits. Here, too, the psychology was the same. Anna Voss had not rehearsed her tears. They were genuine, but she had rehearsed silence. And silence, when it hides a thread of blue cotton, it becomes louder than any scream. Poirot replaced the magnifying lens with precision. Humans wear masks because naked truth is terrifying, he reflected aloud, though speaking as much to the empty air as to the young woman before him. We fear judgment, loss, exposure. So we perform grief, loyalty, innocence, hoping the audience will applaud rather than accuse. Yet every mask is heavy. The weight accumulates. One day, a single thread, a single glance, a single missed cue, and the performance falters. He looked at Anna directly. The first act has concluded. Some masks have cracked. More will follow, because in this theatre of crime, no one can sustain a role forever. He gestured toward the door. You may go, mademoiselle, but know this, Hercule Poirot sees behind the mask, and soon everyone will see. The first mask cracked. Any more would follow. Chapter 4. Rehearsed Lines. The atmosphere in the Royal Danish Library had thickened like fog rolling off the harbour. The public reading rooms remained open, but a discreet cordon of velvet rope now guarded the corridor leading to the manuscript room. Scholars whispered behind raised newspapers. The usual rustle of turning pages sounded hushed and watchful. Inside the director's office, the fire still crackled, but its warmth no longer felt welcoming. The scent of wood smoke mingled uneasily with the sharp bite of cooling coffee, and the faint, persistent trace of Cuban cigar smoke that seemed to linger wherever Herbrandt had passed. Poirot had summoned them again, not all at once, but one by one, each interview designed to press against the seams of their carefully constructed performances. Professor Lars Müller arrived first, tweed jacket slightly rumpled, sandalwood cologne sharper than before, as though freshly applied to steady his nerves. He sat without invitation, legs crossed tightly. You wish to revisit my alibi, he said before Poirot could speak. I've already given it. The Royal Club 3 witnesses. The maitre d' signed the bill at 10:45. I took a taxi home. End of story. Poirot arranged 3 pencils into a perfect triangle on the blotter. Alibis are scripts, Professor. Scripts can be edited. I have spoken with the taxi driver. He remembers you, yes, but he also remembers dropping you at the library's side entrance at 11:20, not at your apartment. A small detour, no? One might almost call it a curtain call. Müller's jaw tightened. His fingers drummed once on the armrest, then stopped abruptly as he realized the tell. I needed to retrieve a notebook I'd left behind earlier. Nothing sinister. Poirot's green eyes gleamed. A notebook, like the one Fruchen Voss carries? Or perhaps one containing notes on Flemish pigments and questionable watermarks? You knew of the inconsistencies, Professor. You argued with Haldor not once, but repeatedly. And on the night he died, you returned, not to collect forgotten property, but to ensure your rival could never expose your own quiet sabotage of his reputation. Müller exhaled through his nose, a sound like steam escaping a kettle. I did not kill him. Mais non, Poirot agreed softly. Not with poison, but lies are also lethal in their way. Your performance of the detached academic is fraying, Professor. Yea, the steady hands tremble now. Truth needs no rehearsal. Lies do, and yours is running out of lines. Müller left without another word, the door closing with a soft final click. Fruken Anna Voss entered next. She no longer wore kid gloves, her bare hands twisted together, knuckles white against the crisp linen of her blouse. Lily of the Valley clung to her, but it seemed weaker, almost apologetic. I've told you everything, she said at once. The thread, the repair. I was frightened, that's all. Poirot tilted his head. Frightened people confess small sins to hide larger ones. You repaired the hinge after his death, yes. But you were here earlier that evening, mademoiselle. The night porter saw a young woman in a light coat slip past him at 11:10. He thought nothing of it. Assistants come and go. Yet you told me you left at 9:30. Anna's breath caught. I came back. I wanted to apologize. We'd argued. I thought perhaps if I explained again. And did you explain? Poirot asked gently. Or did you find him already slumped at his desk, coffee cup empty, and decide silence was safer than discovery? Tears welled again, faster this time, less controlled. I found him like that, she whispered. I panicked. I thought if I fixed the manuscript, if I made it look untouched, no one would question his work, no one would question mine. Poirot nodded slowly. The mask of the loyal protégé slips further. Loyalty performed as devotion. Yet devotion does not tamper with evidence. You have rehearsed innocence too long, mademoiselle. The strain shows. Herr Johann Brandt was the last to be summoned that afternoon. He entered trailing fresh cigar smoke, velvet collar impeccable, smile fixed like a stage prop. You've been busy, Monsieur Poirot, he said, settling into the leather armchair with deliberate ease. Pressing alibis, exposing little secrets, very theatrical. Poirot smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. The theatre rewards the observant. You, for example, play the generous patron with such conviction. Yet generosity does not usually involve secret letters hidden in a fireplace. Letters I discovered this morning when the grate was cleaned. Letters from Dr. Haldor expressing doubt about the manuscript's authenticity. Doubt he intended to share publicly at the exhibition opening. Brandt's smile remained, but the cigar trembled very slightly between his fingers. Private correspondence are nothing more. Private correspondence that threatens millions in projected value, Poirot countered. You funded the authentication knowing, or suspecting, it might be compromised. When Haldor threatened to reveal the truth, your investment became a liability. So you arranged a quiet exit for him, poison in the coffee cup he always drank from at midnight. Simple, elegant, rehearsed. Brandt set the cigar carefully in the ashtray. You have no proof. I have psychology, Poirot said. The helpful financier who arrives first at every crisis, who offers every assistance, who never once lets his composure crack. Too perfect, too rehearsed. Genuine shock brings tremor, perspiration, hesitation. You offered none, because you knew what was coming. Brandt stood abruptly. The armchair creaked in protest. This interview is over. Mais non, Poirot said quietly. It has only begun to become interesting. Brandt left without looking back. The door closed with more force than necessary. Poirot sat alone for a long moment, listening to the grandfather clock chime the half-hour. Rain tapped insistently at the window. The fire snapped once, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. He spoke to the empty room. Rehearsed lines are faltering. The script begins to fail. One by one, the actors stumble. The widow's composure cracks under pressure. The rival's alibi phrase. The protégé's tears reveal more than they hide. The patron's smile grows brittle. He touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. Soon the stage will belong only to truth. And truth, mon ami, requires no curtain call. Rehearsed lines began to falter. The script was failing. Chapter 5. The Mask Slips. The tension in the Royal Danish Library had become almost palpable, like the moment before the house lights dim in a theatre. The public areas still hummed with subdued activity, pages turning, soft footsteps on parquet. But the inner corridors felt empty, expectant. Rain had finally ceased. Now a cold, clear twilight pressed against the tall windows, turning the harbour into a sheet of dark glass. Poirot had requested a private meeting with Fruchen Anna Voss in the conservation laboratory after hours. The room was dimly lit by a single desk lamp that cast long shadows across the work table. The Copenhagen Manuscript lay closed in its acid-free cradle, silent witness. The air smelled of solvents, old vellum, and the faint, lingering lily of the valley that clung to Anna like a signature. She arrived punctually, a coat unbuttoned, bare hands visible and restless. No gloves tonight, no attempt at composure. Her eyes were red-rimmed, not from recent tears, but from hours of fighting them. Poirot did not sit. He stood beside the table, small and precise, green eyes fixed on her with the calm of a director who knows the scene is about to break open. Mademoiselle Voss, he began quietly, we have reached the moment when masks become unbearable. You have performed loyalty admirably, perhaps too admirably, but the strain is visible. The hands no longer tremble only from fear. They tremble from the weight of what they have carried. Anna swallowed. Her voice came out hoarse. I told you the truth. I found him dead. I repaired the hinge because I was terrified the forgery would be discovered. My career, your career, Poirot interrupted gently. It's not what frightens you most tonight. What frightens you is the knowledge, that you were not merely repairing a manuscript. You were protecting something far more personal. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small folded sheet, yellowed notepaper, edges slightly curled. He placed it on the table between them without unfolding it. This letter was found tucked inside the manuscript's end paper when I asked for the volume to be re-examined under ultraviolet light. It is in your handwriting, mademoiselle. Dated 3 weeks before Dr. Haldor's death, it begins, My dearest Eric. Anna's breath stopped. Colour drained from her face so quickly it seemed the lamp dimmed. Poirot continued, voice soft but inexorable. I cannot bear another day of pretending we are only mentor and student. You say we must wait until the exhibition is over, until the funding is secure. But I see the way you look at Ingrid when she visits. I see how you touch her hand. Tell me I am wrong. Tell me I am the one you truly want. Silence stretched, broken only by the distant chime of the grandfather clock marking 8. Anna's shoulders collapsed inward. She reached out, fingertips brushing the letter as though it might burn her. I loved him, she whispered. I thought he loved me. He said we would have a future after the manuscript was authenticated, after everything was safe. But he kept delaying. And then I found letters. Old ones, from Ingrid, passionate, recent. He never stopped loving her. He used me. used my knowledge, my devotion, and to prop up his reputation while he planned to leave with her once the money was secure. Tears came then, not the careful single drops of earlier performances, but a flood. She pressed both hands to her face. Mascara ran in dark rivers down her cheeks. "I confronted him that night," she said between sobs. "I came back after I'd left. I waited until the porter was distracted. I found him at his desk, coffee already poured. I begged him to tell me the truth. He laughed, and said I was a child playing at love. That the manuscript mattered more than either of us. I was so angry, so humiliated." She looked up at Poirot, eyes wide with something close to relief. "But I did not poison him. I swear it. I left him alive. I ran. When I came back later to apologize, to beg forgiveness, he was already gone." Poirot regarded her for a long moment. "The mask has fallen, mademoiselle. Beneath it, the true face at last. A woman betrayed, a woman used, a woman who loved too deeply and was rewarded with mockery. The tears you shed now are not rehearsed. They are the real performance, the only honest one you have given since this drama began." He made an expressive gesture with his small hands. "Love often performs as indifference to protect itself, but when the mask is torn away, what remains is raw, painful, human. You did not kill him, no, but someone did. And that someone counted on your silence, on your shame, to keep the stage clear." Anna nodded slowly, still crying, but the sobs were quieter now, exhausted. "I wanted to protect his legacy," she said, "even after everything, because I still love the man I thought he was." Poirot stepped closer, voice almost tender. "The psychology, it is everything. A heart wounded does not kill with poison, it breaks. But a heart that fears exposure, that fears loss of fortune or reputation, will reach for any weapon. You have given me the key, mademoiselle. Not to your guilt, to someone else's." He turned toward the window, where the last of the twilight had bled into night. The harbour lights reflected like scattered diamonds on black water. The mask has fallen, beneath it the true face at last. And now we approach the final act. The spotlight of truth will soon shine on the one who has played the most convincing role of all. He paused, letting the words settle. "Someone who performed helpfulness, generosity, shock, someone whose mask never slipped, because it was never real. The mask had fallen. The true face emerged. Chapter 6. Behind the Curtain. The library after closing hours felt like a theatre after the audience has departed. Silent, shadowed, still holding the echo of performances past. Dim emergency lights cast long pools of amber across the marble floors. The grandfather clock in the vestibule ticked with slow, deliberate patience. In the director's office, the fire had burned low. Only a few embers glowed behind the screen, sending faint wood smoke curling upward to mingle with the lingering scents of furniture wax and yesterday's champagne. Poirot had asked Fru Margareta Nielsen to remain after the others left. She sat now in the same leather armchair Herr Brandt had occupied earlier. Chanel suit still impeccable, pearls catching the lamplight like tiny moons. Yet her posture had altered. Shoulders less squared, a hands resting loosely in her lap rather than folded with precision. "You wish to know the connections," she said before he could begin. Her voice carried no tremor, only a quiet resignation. "The backstage truths." Poirot inclined his egg-shaped head. "The curtain has been drawn back, madame. The audience has gone. Now we speak plainly." She drew a slow breath. Erich Haldor and Johann Brandt knew each other long before this manuscript surfaced. They met in the early 1930s at an auction in Amsterdam. Brandt was already buying rare books and illuminations, quietly, through intermediaries. Erich authenticated pieces for him. Not all were entirely genuine. Small enhancements, clever repairs. Nothing that would fool a true expert, but enough to inflate value for resale to collectors less discerning. Poirot touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. And the Copenhagen Manuscript? Brandt acquired it privately in 1948 from a Danish émigré family in Sweden. The family claimed it had been in their possession since the 17th century. But Erich suspected parts had been added later. Illuminations overpainted, pages rebound. He told me privately last year that the core text was authentic, but the decoration questionable. He intended to authenticate it fully for the exhibition, then reveal the truth afterward. A dramatic unmasking that would enhance his reputation as the honest scholar. Poirot's green eyes narrowed. Yet he delayed. Why? Because Brandt offered him a share of the projected profit if the manuscript remained pristine in the public eye. A private sale afterward to an American collector who would never question it. Ingrid knew. She encouraged it. Their marriage had grown cold. Money would buy freedom. For both of them. Nielsen paused. The embers snapped once, sending sparks upward. Anna Voss discovered the inconsistencies independently. She confronted Erich. He dismissed her, but she kept pressing, quietly, persistently. Erich began to waver. He wrote that final letter to Brandt, threatening exposure. I saw a draft on his desk the day before he died. Poirot leaned forward slightly. And you, madame, where do you stand in this hidden tableau? Nielsen met his gaze without flinching. I needed the exhibition to succeed. The library's funding depends on patrons like Brandt. I turned a blind eye to the small deceptions. I told myself it was for scholarship, for preserving the collection. But I knew the risks. When Erich died, I assumed suicide or accident. I replaced the key on my desk myself the next morning, a foolish attempt to close the circle. Poirot nodded slowly, helpfulness masking self-preservation, silence masking complicity. The psychology is clear. Behind every curtain, a secret. Behind every secret, a motive. He rose and walked to the window. The harbour lay black and still beyond the glass. A single ship's light moved slowly across the water. Humans hide motives because exposure destroys the roles society assigns us, he reflected aloud. The patron must appear generous, never greedy. The scholar must seem incorruptible, never compromised. The wife must play devotion, never calculation. The protégé must show loyalty, never obsession. We wear these masks because the alternative, naked ambition, raw fear, desperate love, is too ugly for the footlights. Yet the mask grows heavier with every performance. The shoulders ache, the smile strains. Eventually, the body betrays what the face conceals. This reminded him of the case of the Monte Carlo forgery ring in 1937. A syndicate of art dealers had circulated false Renoirs and fake Matisses among wealthy Riviera clients. The ringleader, a charming Swiss banker, performed benevolence so convincingly that even his victims defended him after their losses were revealed. He hosted charity galas, donated to museums, wept publicly when one painting was questioned. But Poirot had noticed the one unguarded moment. When confronted with a genuine pigment analysis report, the banker's left eyelid twitched, once almost imperceptibly. A tick he could not suppress. The body remembers what the mind rehearses away. In the end, the syndicate collapsed not from documents or witnesses, but from that single involuntary flinch. The psychology beneath the performance is always the truest evidence. Here, too, the connections formed a web of hidden motives. Greed disguised as patronage, love twisted into betrayal, ambition cloaked as scholarship, fear performing as duty. Each actor had believed their secret compartment secure, until one small thread of blue cotton, one undelivered letter, one replaced key began to unravel the entire production. Poirot turned back to Fru Nielsen. "You have spoken truth tonight, madame. Not the whole truth, perhaps never the whole truth, but enough. The curtain is rising on the final act, and the spotlight will find the one whose mask has never slipped, because it was forged of colder material than the others." He made a small, expressive gesture with his hands. Behind every curtain, a secret. Behind every secret, a motive. And behind the final motive, the hand that poured the poison. Nielsen rose slowly. For the first time, her pearls seemed to weigh her down. "Then let the curtain fall," she said quietly. Behind every curtain, a secret. Every secret, a motive. Chapter 7. The Final Act. The manuscript room had been transformed into the grandest stage of all. Every velvet curtain was drawn back. The Art Deco sconces burned at full strength, bathing the long mahogany table in golden light. Crystal chandeliers tinkled faintly, as though applauding the gathering, and the Copenhagen Manuscript rested at the centre, like a silent protagonist, its dark calfskin cover gleaming under soft spotlights. Chairs had been arranged in a precise semicircle, 5 seats for the 5 remaining players. The air carried the mingled scents of hothouse roses, brought fresh that morning, expensive perfume, lingering cigar smoke, and the sharp continental bite of strong coffee poured into porcelain cups that steamed gently. Hercule Poirot stood at the head of the table, small, immaculate, hands clasped behind his back. His patent shoes reflected the light like black mirrors. He waited until the last footstep died away on the parquet, until the grandfather clock in the corridor beyond chimed 9 with solemn finality. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, voice clear and measured, "you have each performed for Hercule Poirot, some truthfully, some not. The curtain has risen on this theatre of crime many times. Tonight it rises for the last time. Let us review the performances, shall we?" He turned first to Fru Ingrid Haldor. She sat rigid in black silk, lace handkerchief folded unused in her lap. "Madame Haldor, you played the grieving widow with exquisite restraint. The dry eyes, the steady voice, the perfect composure. Bravo! Yet grief performed as dignity is still performance. You knew of your husband's plan to expose the manuscript's enhancements, and to take the proceeds with you both to a new life. But when he wavered, when Anna Voss threatened revelation, when money slipped away, you prepared the coffee as always. Black, scalding. And into it, the rare alkaloid you had acquired months earlier for research into medieval pigments. The cup you handed him at midnight, the cup you left perfectly centered on its saucer. Ingrid's lips parted. No sound emerged. Poirot continued without pause. "Professor Muller, you performed the detached rival, the alibi carefully rehearsed, the taxi detour explained away. You did not kill with poison, but you blackmailed Haldor with knowledge of the Flemish overpainting. You threatened exposure unless he shared the profits. When he refused, you returned that night to confront him. You found him already dying. You left him. Loyalty to scholarship performed as resentment. The mask of the academic slipped when your hands finally trembled, not from shock, but from relief. Müller stared at the table. His fingers curled inward. "Fröken Voss," Poirot said more gently, "you played the devoted protégé. The tears were real, the love was real, and the betrayal cut deepest of all. You confronted him. You fled. You returned to repair the manuscript in panic. But you did not kill. Your mask was cracked by honest pain. Beneath it, the wounded heart." Anna nodded once, eyes wet but steady. "Fru Nielsen," Poirot turned to the director, "you performed the guardian of culture, helpful, transparent. Yet you replaced the key to protect funding. You turned a blind eye to deception for the sake of the library's future. Complicity performed as duty. The mask never quite fell, because you believed the role justified the silence." Nielsen bowed her head slightly. The pearls at her throat caught the light and held it. "And so we come to our leading performer." All eyes turned to Herr Johann Brandt. He sat last in the semicircle, velvet collar impeccable, cigar unlit between steady fingers. He smiled, thin, practiced, unshaken. "Monsieur Poirot," he said smoothly, "you weave an entertaining narrative, but evidence, proof. I funded everything. I mourned the loss. I cooperated fully." Poirot stepped closer. His green eyes gleamed like polished jade. Magnifique! The role of the generous patron, helpful, shocked, outraged at every turn. You arrived first, after the discovery. You offered every assistance. You never once let your composure crack. Too perfect, too rehearsed. He made a small, expressive gesture. But you made one error. One small moment when the mask slipped. When I showed you Dr. Haldor's final letter, threatening to expose the enhancements at the opening, you reached for your cigar case. Your hand was rock steady. No tremor, no perspiration. A man truly horrified by murder, or by the threat of ruin, would betray some physical agitation. The body knows the truth even when the face lies. Yours did not, because you already knew what was in that coffee cup. You prepared it yourself during the reception, a quiet moment in the manuscript room. The poison slipped in while he stepped away to speak with Fröken Voss. You left the cup waiting. You left him to drink it at midnight, as was his habit. You left the stage clear. Brandt's smile froze. The cigar slipped from his fingers and rolled across the table. Poirot drew himself up. The performance is over. The curtain falls. The truth takes her bow. He turned to the assembled cast. Greed performed as patronage. Resentment performed as scholarship. Love performed as loyalty. Complicity performed as duty. Betrayal performed as grief. But one role required cold calculation above all others, the role of the financier who could not afford exposure. Herr Brandt, the spotlight is yours. Brandt rose slowly. No outburst, no denial, only a long exhaled breath. I believed the manuscript would secure everything, he said quietly. When Haldor threatened to destroy it all, I acted. The room fell silent. The chandeliers tinkled once, softly, as though the theatre itself sighed. Poirot spoke the final words. The final act has concluded. Only truth survived the curtain call. The final act concluded. Only truth survived the curtain call. Chapter 8. Curtain Call. The manuscript room felt suddenly smaller after the revelation, as though the walls themselves had drawn closer to witness justice take its place. The golden sconces still burned, but their light now seemed harsher, stripping away the last illusions of elegance. The Copenhagen Manuscript rested untouched on its velvet cradle, no longer the glittering centerpiece of ambition, but merely an old book that had cost one life and shattered several others. The grandfather clock in the corridor chimed 10. Each stroke fell like the slow closing of heavy theatre doors. Inspector Larsen entered quietly, flanked by 2 uniformed officers whose boots sounded unnaturally loud on the parquet. He had been waiting in the vestibule, listening through the half-open door at Poirot's quiet request. Now he stepped forward, face grave but composed, the professional mask of authority firmly in place. "Herr Johann Brandt," Larsen said, voice carrying the flat authority of law. "You are under arrest for the murder of Dr. Erich Haldor, and you will be taken into custody and charged accordingly." Brandt did not resist. He rose slowly from his chair, velvet collar still impeccable, though the cigar had long since fallen forgotten to the floor. His hands, so steady throughout every performance, now hung loose at his sides. No tremor, no protest, only the faint final exhale of a man whose script had run out of pages. "I would like my solicitor present," he said quietly. "Nothing more." Larsen nodded to the officers. They moved forward, one producing handcuffs that clicked open with a small metallic sound. Brandt extended his wrists without prompting. The steel closed around them, not roughly, but with the impersonal efficiency of routine. The faint clink echoed in the hushed room like the last note of a forgotten melody. Fru Ingrid Haldor remained seated, the black silk pooling around her like spilled ink. Her lace handkerchief lay crumpled in her lap at last, not from tears, but from the simple release of tension. She looked neither at her husband's killer nor at Poirot. Her gaze fixed on the manuscript, as though seeing it for the first time. "You knew," she whispered to no one in particular. "You all knew he was planning to leave with the money, with me, and none of you spoke. No one answered. The silence was answer enough." Professor Lars Müller stood abruptly, tweed jacket creased from hours of sitting. He smoothed it with automatic hands, then stopped as though the gesture suddenly felt pointless. "I never intended," he began, then fell silent. His academic mask had cracked long ago. What remained was only weariness. The blackmail was foolish, the resentment was real, but murder, no, I would never have gone that far. Poirot inclined his head. "Resentment performs many roles, Professor. Sometimes it merely watches from the wings. Sometimes it hands another the poison. You chose observation. That choice at least spares you the spotlight of guilt." Müller gave a short, bitter nod and moved toward the door. An officer stepped aside to let him pass. He left without looking back. Fröken Anna Voss remained beside the table, bare hands clasped tightly together. Mascara tracks had dried on her cheeks. She made no attempt to wipe them away. For the first time since the investigation began, she looked neither frightened nor rehearsed, only young, exhausted, and strangely relieved. "I loved him," she said softly, as though testing the words one last time. "Even after the betrayal, even after the humiliation. But love doesn't excuse silence. I should have spoken sooner." Poirot regarded her with something close to gentleness. "Love often wears the heaviest mask, mademoiselle. You have removed yours. The pain beneath is honest. That is more than many can claim tonight." She nodded once, small and final, then walked slowly toward the exit. Her footsteps sounded light, unburdened for the first time. Fru Margarete Nielsen rose last. Her Chanel suit remained flawless, the pearls still gleamed. Yet when she spoke, her voice carried the faint tremor of someone who has held composure too long. "The library will survive," she said. "The exhibition will be postponed. The manuscript will be re-evaluated, properly this time. I will tender my resignation tomorrow. Transparency, Monsieur Poirot, at last." Poirot made a small, expressive gesture with his hands. "Complicity performed as duty is perhaps the most dangerous role of all, madame. but confession performed as courage. That redeems something." She met his eyes for a long moment. Then she turned and followed the others out. The door closed softly behind her. Only Poirot and Inspector Larson remained with Brunt and the two officers. Larson cleared his throat. "Monsieur Poirot, your assistance has been exceptional. The case is closed, essentially. We will take statements tomorrow. The poison vial was found in Brunt's overcoat pocket during the initial search. Traces matching the alkaloid. Motive clear. Means clear. Opportunity confirmed by the reception timeline." Poirot smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. "Means and motive are useful, Inspector, but psychology closes the curtain. It's a steady hand that never trembled. The helpfulness that never faltered. The performance too perfect to be real." Larson nodded once. "We'll take him now." The officers guided Brunt toward the door. He paused at the threshold, looking back at the manuscript room one final time. Not at the book, not at the table, at Poirot. "You saw everything," he said quietly. "From the beginning." Poirot inclined his head. "I saw the performance, monsieur. The little grey cells do not applaud illusion." Brunt gave the faintest of smiles, resigned, almost appreciative. Then allowed himself to be led away. The handcuffs clinked once more as they passed into the corridor. Poirot stood alone in the centre of the room. The chandeliers tinkled softly overhead. The fire in the distant grate had died to ash. The scent of roses had begun to fade. He spoke to the empty stage. "The curtain call has come. No applause follows this performance, only justice. The actors depart, some to cells, some to reckoning, some to quiet reconstruction. The theatre empties, the lights dim." He turned toward the tall windows, where the harbour lay black and still. "But justice, mon ami, is not theatrical. It is simple. It is final. It requires no encore. No applause for this performance. Only justice." Chapter 9. After the show. The Royal Danish Library reopened to the public 3 days later, but the air inside had changed. The manuscript room remained cordoned off with discreet velvet rope. A small brass plaque now explained that the Copenhagen Manuscript was undergoing scholarly re-evaluation. No dramatic announcement, no scandalous headlines, only quiet efficiency, the Danish way, and the scent of hothouse roses had been replaced by the clean sharpness of fresh floor polish, and the faint comforting must of undisturbed books. Sunlight slanted through the tall windows for the first time in weeks, turning dust motes into slow golden sparks. Fru Ingrid Haldor had left Copenhagen the morning after the arrest. She took only 2 suitcases and the contents of the joint account she had quietly transferred the week before Eric's death. No black silk, no lace handkerchief, a simple grey wool coat and a ticket to Paris on the night train. There she intended to disappear into the city's anonymity, perhaps to open a small gallery dealing in minor impressionists. Nothing too ambitious, nothing that would draw attention. She had not attended the brief police interview. Her solicitor answered questions on her behalf. In complicity, without direct action. She would live comfortably, but never again in the spotlight she had once craved. Professor Lars Müller resigned his position at the library the same afternoon. He packed his office in 2 cardboard boxes, academic journals, a few dog-eared monographs on Flemish illumination, a single framed photograph of himself shaking hands with a long-dead Danish king at some forgotten ceremony. He moved to a modest flat in Aarhus, where he accepted a part-time lecturing post at the university. No more rivalries, no more blackmail. He spent his evenings cataloguing private collections for elderly widows who still valued scholarship over profit. The tweed jacket hung in the closet, rarely worn. Resentment had burned itself out. What remained was a quieter man who no longer needed to prove anything. To Fruken Anna Voss stayed. She requested, and was granted, a temporary leave of absence, but returned after only 6 weeks. The library board, perhaps sensing the value of continuity, offered her a permanent position as junior curator of medieval manuscripts. She accepted. The lily-of-the-valley perfume remained her signature, though she wore it more lightly now. She no longer twisted her hands when nervous. Instead, she clasped them calmly behind her back, a small echo of Poirot's own mannerism. The tears had dried. The love had faded into memory. What grew in its place was determination. She began a meticulous re-examination of the Copenhagen Manuscript, documenting every overpainted flourish, every questionable repair. Her first published article on the subject appeared the following year in a respected Scandinavian journal. It carried no bitterness, only precision. The wounded heart had healed into something stronger. Fru Margareta Nielsen tendered her resignation as promised. It was accepted with regret, and a private dinner in her honour, at which no one mentioned poison or keys or hidden letters. She moved to a small house on the north coast of Zealand, where the sea air smelled of salt and pine rather than furniture wax and old vellum. She took up gardening, roses ironically, and began writing a memoir of her years as director. The manuscript would be mentioned only in passing, the murder not at all. She visited the library occasionally as a guest, always wearing the same strand of pearls. Complicity had been confessed. Duty had been redefined. She lived quietly, and in that quiet found a peace she had never known while performing the role of guardian. Herr Johann Brandt awaited trial in a modern detention facility on the outskirts of the city. His velvet-collared overcoat had been taken into evidence. He wore plain grey now. The cigar smoke no longer followed him. Visitors were few, his solicitor once a week. The American collector who had hoped to purchase the manuscript quietly withdrew his interest. The projected fortune evaporated like morning mist. Brandt spent his days reading, history mostly, never fiction. He wrote no confession, offered no dramatic explanation. When asked by his lawyer why he had acted, he said only, the performance had gone on too long. Greed had worn the mask of patronage until the mask fused to the face. When it was torn away, nothing recognizable remained beneath. The library itself recovered slowly. The exhibition was postponed indefinitely. A new, honest authentication process began under international oversight. Attendance dipped briefly, then rose again. Curiosity drew some, genuine scholarship others. The manuscript room lost its air of hushed drama and returned to its proper function. A place of study, not spectacle. Hercule Poirot had departed the day after the arrests. He took the afternoon ferry to Malmö, then the train south through Germany. In his compartment, he sat with a small pot of tisane, watching the landscape slide past in orderly rectangles of field and forest. He touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully once or twice, then settled back with a volume of Baudelaire. The case was closed. The theatre had emptied, yet something lingered. The actors had departed the stage, some to punishment, some to penance, some to quiet reconstruction. Masks had been stripped away, faces revealed. Not all were beautiful, not all were monstrous. Most were simply human. Flawed, frightened, grasping, grieving. The theatre of crime had shown its final scene, and the curtain had fallen without applause. But lessons remained. Greed, when performed as generosity, eventually starves the performer. Love, when masked as loyalty, can blind even the clearest eyes. Ambition, cloaked in duty, consumes its own, and truth, patient, unadorned, waits in the wings until every rehearsed line has been spoken. The theatre emptied. The lessons lingered. Chapter 10. Poirot reviews the performance. The Orient Express glided smoothly through the night, its rhythm a gentle lullaby of steel wheels on rails. Hercule Poirot sat alone in his favourite first-class compartment, with the small table before him set with precision. A porcelain cup of tisane steaming faintly, a crystal glass of water untouched, a single fresh napkin folded into perfect thirds. The carriage lamps cast a warm amber glow across the polished walnut panelling. Outside the window, the dark countryside of northern Germany slipped past like forgotten scenery after the final curtain. He wore his dressing gown of heavy silk, the colour of old Burgundy, and had arranged the few objects on the table with habitual symmetry. A fountain pen parallel to the edge, a small leather notebook open to a blank page, his reading spectacles resting beside it. The scent of the tisane, chamomile laced with a hint of honey, mingled with the faint leather of the seat and the distant comforting aroma of cigar smoke drifting from another compartment. Poirot lifted the cup, inhaled, then set it down again without drinking. His green eyes gazed not at the passing landscape, but inward, at the small grey cells that turned over every detail of the Copenhagen affair, like actors rehearsing a well-worn scene. "Humans perform rather than reveal truth," he murmured to the empty compartment, "because truth is dangerous. It strips away the roles society hands us at birth: widow, scholar, patron, protégé, guardian. We learn early that naked feeling invites judgment, loss, ridicule. So we rehearse grief as composure, ambition as generosity, love as loyalty, fear as duty. The mask becomes second nature. We forget we are wearing it." He touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. In this little drama, the masks were particularly well crafted. Ingrid Haldor performed devotion while calculating escape. Lars Müller performed scholarly detachment while nursing resentment like a slow poison. Anna Voss performed innocence while her heart bled from betrayal. Margareta Nilsson performed integrity while protecting institutional vanity. And Johann Brandt, Brandt performed benevolence so flawlessly that even I, Hercule Poirot, was momentarily intrigued by the perfection. Yet perfection in performance is always suspect. Truth stumbles, lies glide. He leaned back against the velvet upholstery, letting the gentle sway of the train carry his thoughts. This case reminded me strongly of the affair of Sir Charles Cartwright in 1932, the stage and screen star who orchestrated his own suicide to escape debt and scandal, and only to be unmasked by the very steadiness of his hand when he should have trembled in horror at the discovery of the body. He had rehearsed every gesture, the gasp, the stagger, the pressing of fingers to temples. But when the moment came to feign shock at the sight of poison, his pulse remained even, his pupils did not dilate. The body refuses to lie when the mind has over-rehearsed. In Copenhagen, Brandt made the same error. The hand that reached for the cigar case never shook. A man learning his closest associate has been murdered, or that his fortune hangs by a thread, betrays agitation. Sweat, a flicker, something. Brandt offered nothing, because he already knew the performance had no surprises left for him. Poirot's small hands made a slow, expressive gesture. Guilt always betrays the actor. It may hide for a time, behind helpfulness, behind outrage, behind silence, but the little signs accumulate. The dry handkerchief, the steady fingers, the glance that lingers too long on the murder weapon rather than the victim. The body remembers what the face denies. And society demands these masks. The rich man must appear generous, never grasping. The scholar must seem pure, never compromised. The woman must play grief, never calculation. Yet every mask has weight. The shoulders tire, the smile cracks. Eventually, the truth emerges, not because it is noble, but because it is inevitable. The performance cannot be sustained forever. He lifted the tisane again, sipped once, set it down. In the end, truth triumphs over performance because truth requires no effort. It simply is. Lies demand constant vigilance. Every line remembered, every gesture timed, every alibi polished. One lapse, one unguarded moment, and the curtain tears. Brant's lapse was the steadiness of his hand. Anna's was the thread of blue cotton. Ingrid's was the untouched handkerchief. Small things, human things, and yet decisive. He gazed out at the night. A distant village light flickered past, then vanished. The theatre of crime teaches us this above all. We are all actors. We play the parts assigned, by family, by profession, by expectation. But no role is perfect. Beneath every mask waits a face, flawed, frightened, hopeful, ashamed, angry, loving. To see that face requires only patience and observation, and a little spotlight of truth. Poirot smiled faintly, the satisfied smile of a director who has brought the house down without raising his voice. Made the Copenhagen Manuscript will be re-evaluated. Scholars will argue over Flemish pigments and over-painted gold for years. Anna Voss will publish her findings and earn quiet respect. Ingrid will vanish into Paris drawing rooms. Müller will teach in obscurity. Nilsson will tend roses by the sea. Brant will sit in a cell, reading history he once tried to rewrite. Each has stepped off the stage. Each carries the lessons of the performance they gave, and the one they failed to sustain. He closed the notebook with a soft snap. Until the next theatre of crime calls, mes amis, Poirot will be watching. He reached up and dimmed the carriage lamp. The compartment fell into gentle shadow, lit only by the faint glow from the corridor beyond. The train continued south through the night, carrying its solitary passenger toward Brussels, toward home, is toward whatever new drama awaited on another stage. Until the next theatre of crime, mes amis. Poirot watches always.